sometimes people have what it takes, but they haven't recognized it yet. Just go forward. So what do you need to do? How do you stand out? So what you need to do is be that person that's different and is bigger than you think. Rise from the ashes and fly like the phoenixes that you are. Welcome. Hello, everybody. This is Andrew David, Blake Newbar's partner program, talking today a little bit about personality types, talking about difficulties, talking about whatever the heck it is that's kept you from kind of getting to that next level. Let's talk a little bit about that. Now, when we look at, it's interesting, whenever you look at leadership and you look at success, there are articles and a lot of times, you'll read a book here, an article there. And unless you get like really seriously into studying these biographies and these books on success, and when I mean serious, I mean not just reading a dozen of them. I mean, once you get up into the hundreds of books read and maybe even crossing that 1,000 mark, and I'm pushing towards that, but you do more and more and more. If you just read a handful, you go, oh, well, this idea is a little different than this one, and this idea is a little different than that one. And you may see a thread or two that seem similar. The more you read, the more you start to recognize quite a few patterns that are going on when it comes to this, right? You may read an article in Forbes or Entrepreneur Magazine, or you see one or the other, and it's almost like this fairy tale that's being written about how things should be and how leaders should act and how employees work together, and great leaders come about and they are glowing in their thoughts being expressed to their employees, and the employees love them and they follow them as leaders, and everything goes great. And yeah, they have a little ups and downs once in a while as they build their business, but they overcome those tribulations together and things move forward. Well, the reality is that's not always the case. That a lot of people that become entrepreneurs do it because they just don't fit in other locations. They're hard to work with. They're fairly stubborn, oftentimes highly intelligent, but they don't seem highly intelligent because they struggle in focusing with things. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Struggle to keep focus with any of it? So I want to talk about a little bit personality types of entrepreneurship. So I want to talk about ADHD and how that affects people. Now, ADHD in children, and someone do me a favor, somebody either on their phone or Google, do me a quick search and find out, see how many children are diagnosed, like a percentage of children with ADHD. Just say how many children, what's the percentage of children diagnosed with ADHD? Something like that. The average percentage of adults is only about 4 to 5%. Meaning there's this disconnect with how many in the kids versus adults. Michael, do you have that, or does anybody else have that?
Still looking. Let's see. It shows as of 2000, 9.4%, which I thought would be a little higher.
9.4%. Oh, he just said it. I just found it.
Yeah. So percentage of kids with ADHD. So I've got one that 11%, ages 4 to 17. As of 2011, it may be even higher now. You guys are pulling from CDC, which is 2016, right?
We're all on the same page.
Yeah. So let's say somewhere between 9 and now I'm looking at one with CHAD, and I'm sure that's like the Children's Health ADD. So this one is saying 15.5% of school children in grades 1 to 5 have ADHD. So 9 to 15%. Okay. 9 to 15%, let's say. Now adults, 4 to 5. So why the change? If 9 to 15% of kids have it. Now remember, this isn't a disability. They call it a disorder, which is, kind of trying to create the stigma, saying, hey, this is a problem. There's something wrong with you. Okay. It would be real interesting, Hartley, to see how COVID has affected this and other things. I know they've done studies to show that it's raised depression and other things like that. So it wouldn't surprise me if it has raised that because people staying home more. So what do you guys think? What is the difference between that 9 to 15% and the 4 to 5% when it comes to adults? Why is there that change?
I'd like to add one thing I can tell you that I'm positive has been affecting us is our foods. We have so many GMOs. We have so many carbs that are put in now. We have so many chemicals. Foods are not what they were back in the 60s and the 70s.
True. Absolutely true. And you go back even further. So maybe during the next couple of days, we can look at root causes of, I know there's, you could say that, you could say now the screens. So we have food, we have screen time, you have, all sorts of other things. The way that we teach in the school system, because everybody learns so differently, it is a whole other world. If you guys want a really interesting video, one of my favorite videos of all time, look up the education paradigm. I want to say it was by the RDF, or look for the animated education paradigm. And it talks about the education system, and it was done by someone from the UK. But it's one of those where, he's speaking and it's the animations following along with it. And it's absolutely amazing. So yeah, definitely not just the increased diagnosis. So if we look at kids to adults, I think there's a few reasons. First off, most adults are unwilling to say, look, I've got ADHD. A lot of them just are, right? We don't want to admit to having any problems. It is ingrained. We are trained to not want. Yeah, Jess, thank you very much. We are ingrained to not want to admit to having anything wrong with us, right? Does anybody here walk around like, hey, guess what? I'm depressed. I've got ADHD. Here's this problem. I've got this problem, right? Nobody does. Roderick?
No, they don't.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something.
Oh, I was going to say that I think that a lot of it is when kids were growing up years ago, they had less things to take their attention. The more video games took over and the fast pace of video games and the pace you've got to be on to level up. Then when they go to school, it's like sitting around and it's boring. And so they've got their brains on this fast paced wired thing. And I think that as they grow older, they begin to wire down some of them. That may be the difference in adults and kids. I don't know.
I think, again, we can talk about, a list of reasons why. Absolutely. Food, screen time. There's people were going out to play more. Sure. Absolutely. But the diagnosis, the matter of fact is that diagnosis is higher now than it was. And yet adult diagnosis doesn't match up. Right. So do adults learn to manage it better? Maybe. Probably not. I mean, just probably not. Because they don't go in and go, hey, can you help me with my ADHD? Nancy, go ahead.
And when I was teaching dance, I had a lot of students that had ADHD. They seemed to flock to me. I don't know why. I think it was the dance, but they were very, very intelligent. And I wondered, my oldest son was very ADHD.
Can you speak up?
Oh, sure. Maybe I need to.
You're just a little away from the microphone.
Oh, okay. My oldest was very ADHD. He became a special ops Marine. Kind of took care of his need to be moving all the time.
Right.
Very intelligent. And I find that with all the kids I worked with so many kids that they all were very smart. They just don't want to sit still. So I have to think that it has something to do with our education system.
Yeah. So understanding what's needed is key. But the thing is now most of us are adults, right? We're here now. We're grown up. So sitting in a regular classroom with a regular teacher, a lot of us have learned that just doesn't work. It's why some people, I'll talk with some of you guys and you go, well, I learned fine in a group. I learned better on my own. I learned at my own pace. You don't have the patience to wait and go through things or do this or do that. So there is some correlation. So what I want to do, I want to talk a little bit about some of these personality traits And what we need to do is, this goes to, again, self-awareness. So understanding who you are. Some of you guys may fit real well with this. Some of you guys may be married to someone that is experiencing some of this. Odds are, if you're pushing towards this feeling of, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur, you've got some of these characteristics. So how do we nurture them, and how do we take some of these characteristics that others may view as a disorder, that employers may view as a disorder, and how do we turn them into a strength for us? Because there's a reason that a lot of entrepreneurs don't do well, right, within a typical structure of basic employment. Having a bunch of rules and red tape, a lot of people don't do well with, right? If it's too structured, entrepreneur or an ADHD, an adult with ADHD may struggle with, right? If they're being micromanaged, does anybody like to be micromanaged? Does anybody like to be told exactly what to do? No. We like to be given a little bit of instruction and then let me get my stuff done, right? I don't want all the bureaucracy. Just let me finish it. I can get it done. I don't need to go through 12 different layers to make sure that happens. So here's a couple of things. Number one, a lot of people, so I want you to just think about if any of this kind of describes you. Okay, you got a problem with authority. You don't like being told what to do. I know there's a number of you on this call that will 100%, that's what it is. Well, hey, I know that's what Blake said to do, but I don't want to do that. That's the easiest example that I've got. But think about your work career. Okay. How often are you looking for different ways to do it? You get directions, but you're not great at following them. I've had to teach myself, when it comes to putting things together, to pull out the direction books and follow the directions, because normally I would just do it on my own. And then at the end you go, something's not right. And then you have to go back and you start over. Right. So if you can't follow directions, or you're impatient with how they want you to do it. So you're sitting in a meeting, you're hearing how they want you to do it, and you're just like, gosh, this is going to take so long. Why do I have to do it their way? There's a better way to do it. This is just bugging me. Okay, so that's one way. That's one sign. Next, relationships. Failed relationships, no relationships, or you're forever single or something. So you can't commit, or you're too committed to a dream. Okay, so what you need to do is work to find a partner that will believe with you. Okay, so what you're looking for is this last one. Okay, someone that will work with you in belief and in deed, or that will understand. I'm very blessed that that my partner, my fiance, understands that I am engaged in my work, and when I'm done, I am studying this personal development side, and I, thrive with events, and that's how I build relationships, and that's how I build friendships. And I don't do it through, all of these common ways that a lot of other people may. But so she understands in my belief, and she's, committed to following some of those deeds, but it's helpful, right? Whereas my first relationship, that wasn't there, right? Because I couldn't connect with the status quo that, hey, you have to live it this way. So here's some other characteristics of someone with ADHD. You might be an introvert. You might be a hermit. You might be a recluse. You're quiet. You're not the social butterfly. You understand the power of relationships, but it doesn't need to be. There's a difference in powerful relationships and a bunch of acquaintances. You're the person that's going to sit in the back of the room, and you're going to observe, and you're going to plan, and then you're going to get things done. You're not necessarily going to be in the front of the room with hoping to be a leader, right? So you may be a little arrogant, a little cocky, a little bit of self-belief. Now there's modesty, there's false modesty. You can have a belief in yourself. Other people may not get it as that. They may just view you as arrogant. Now, all right, well, let me hit this last one, then we'll kind of talk about all of these. So, and then you can have a one-track mind. So you become obsessed with certain elements. You have an unstoppable need to get certain things done or to learn everything about something. That's one reason why a lot of people that have the ADHD struggle to launch the business, is because they get obsessed with learning about it and trying to get to be the best that they can with it, or understand everything before they actually launch. And so they're just so focused on the education side that they don't get anything done. And then you struggle with the work-life balance. So let's see. On top of everything else, we live in a media-driven, willing to follow directions from one who is proven true. Too many are programmed to believe if you do not have the 8-to-5 office job, you do not have a real job or career. Absolutely true. Too many people believe that. Now, do any of these hit home with anybody here that they want to kind of chat about, that they're willing to talk about? Problems with authority, failed relationships, or struggling with relationships or commitments, being an introvert, being a little bit arrogant, or maybe other people see as that, and then the one-track mind. Anybody want to talk a little bit about it?
Yeah.
Well,
I'm all of those, and I just try to better myself. Very simple.
In what way, Forrest?
Well, get micromanaged quite a bit, and I have to be patient with the people that do that, because I am working jobs for other people, in my particular business. But I do have a problem with people telling me how to do my job.
Right.
So, yeah, I am impatient when it comes to that. I'm the first to admit it.
Well, and here's the thing, and what I have found personally, and then trying to study so many of these successful entrepreneurs, it kind of goes with what Michael was saying earlier. Like, I don't have any problem following directions if someone that's successful, that has done it, is the one sharing that information. Now, what I've learned to do is take pieces of that information, because the reality is not everybody's pathway is going to match. Just because, Steve Sims, I love the guy, I love his training, I love his books, everything else. I'm going to his event here in a couple of weeks, but some portions of his pathway aren't going to match mine, right? Like, it's not. So I'm going to take the pieces that do, and I'm going to use them, and I'm going to take the other pieces that match with, Gay Hendricks or someone else from Blake and others. And I'm going to apply that to my life so that I can get going. Now, this kind of goes with what Forrest says. And I'm sure some of the rest of you, when it comes to kind of that, don't tell me how to do my job. And then this comes into, well, you're just being arrogant. You're unwilling to listen. There's a difference, because we've become obsessed with certain things. And oftentimes adults with ADHD, if you learn to channel it appropriately, you become exceptionally good at whatever you choose to do. Now, this is where, getting into that zone of genius versus just being excellent at something, this is where that can come into play. And that's kind of a further conversation, but you get good at it. And because you're good at it, you're unwilling to listen to people tell you how to do the job when they've never done it. You get... And then you add in the fact that you may be a little bit of an introvert, or socially you don't want to put yourself out there as much. Then people say, well, you're arrogant or conceited or this or that, right? I don't feel like that's always the case. I feel it's just you've gained a level of expertise within your chosen field. You're not as socially adept at kind of communicating those things, like the fact that you are a little bit of an introvert. And so it puts off this other vibe. And one of the things that you need to do is be aware of that fact, be a little more patient when talking with others. Just because someone gives you the advice doesn't necessarily mean you have to listen to it, but it also doesn't mean we have to say, yeah, I get it. Thanks. I know how to do my job. And Forrest, I'm not saying, you're doing that, but I do the same thing. And so sometimes you need to step back. I understand what I do and where I excel and where I'm good at things. And sometimes people try and tell me how to do it. And I just, okay, fine. And then, I'm not following those directions and I roll off this way and I just get it done and come back and they go, oh, well, yeah, I get it. Right. So does someone else, I think Nancy, Michael, Hartley, you guys had something you wanted to kind of bring out there?
Well, I'll speak up. I think for me, it's age is sometimes gets in the way, because I've been at what I do for a long time. And when I have someone younger than me trying to tell me how it should be done, man, I have a hard time with that. And I think back to when I was working in my first college, And they talked a lot about the World War II veterans returning to college on the GI Bill, which was a fantastic opportunity. Now, I wonder about these World War II veterans that are sitting in class that have seen things that most of us will never see in our entire lifetimes. Listening to that professor who has never been outside the classroom, telling them this is how things are, I just wonder how they accepted that. That really hits me hard now that I've had a lot of life experiences when I'm trying to listen to someone and say, yeah, okay, I'll go along with that. And a lot of times I will. I really believe they have some solid basis, but I find myself at odds with people now more and more because no, that isn't the way it is. So that's
how do you, so here's where you take this. At times we have to be careful because sometimes we have that unwavering self-belief of I know, and sometimes that is true. But then we live in a world where information is so much more fast-paced that there are new or different ways that may not necessarily be wrong, may just be different. Now, I agree. I get occasionally people that have never done anything come in and, try and tell me something. I'm like, all right, well, but you've never done any of that. And you read one book or you listened to one podcast and look, the reality is this, right? How about we talk about something a little bit different? But how do you guide that conversation that way? The biggest part of this, the grand scheme of things, Michael, you were going to say something? Go ahead.
Oh, no, I just have my mic on.
Okay. No. I think for me, our biggest responsibility with this, if you feel like that ADHD and some of those elements kind of fit you, and I'm going to show a couple of other things here. If you look at any of these, if you go and you study out ADHD, there's some free tests that you can take. I don't even remember. PsyCom is probably the website. You might need to look that up, or just psy.com. I'm not sure, but there's some personality tests that you can take. This was one that I did not too long ago. I scored 23 out of 24 as an adult with ADHD. So high likelihood that that's what I had. I think the key element with all this, and I'll get a little bit more into some of these things and how to not just identify, but leverage how ADHD works so that you can get the most out of it as an adult. Because here's what you have to do, guys. If you identify with any of these things, I would recommend doing a little bit of studying. We're going to get a little more depth into it tomorrow. If you don't at all, but you're going, man, that doesn't suit me at all. I wonder how I am. I wonder who I am. I wonder how my personality would work in the workplace as an entrepreneur, building my own business, being an employee, whatever that is. It all boils down to self-awareness and self-responsibility. Right. It goes to, I know Forrest has got it, and some of you, Michael might, and some of the other ones, Jocko's discipline equals freedom. It all boils down to my personal responsibility, my discipline, and taking responsibility for what's here. Now, what a lot of people struggle with when they take responsibility for things is they go, well, I'm no good at this over here, and I'm no good at this over here. And so there's a bit of depression that seeps in because you go, man, I just suck at this. And we don't want to do that. We want to blame someone else for our shortcomings, where the reality is it's okay to not be great at things because you do have inherent strengths, but you need to learn what those strengths are and then learn how to leverage them. Because some of those things that you may suck at, let's be real, most of the rest of us suck at it too. There's just a handful of people that are good at, there's very few people in this world that are good at everything. You'll have some people that are good at one and some people that are good at another. You need to figure out what you're good at. You figure out where your strengths lie. You need to figure out what those weaknesses are, not to spend a bunch of time dealing with the weaknesses, but to just identify them so that you can pinpoint where I may need help and how I can leverage my strengths. I've mentioned this before, but with the therapist I had a while ago, one of the things that he mentioned to me was he brought up this idea about ADHD. And as an adult, I had never addressed it personally. I'd never thought about it. I mean, I knew that I would start something and I'd be good at it, and I'd get to a certain point and I'd be like, okay, I'm done. And then I would start something else and then I'd get there and okay, I'm done. And then all of a sudden I'm juggling 20 different things and wondering why nothing is getting to that point that it's moving forward the right way. Well, I would get bored. The challenge wasn't there. Some of you guys may be sitting there now with this. You've gotten the funnel done, like challenge is done there. but you haven't accepted that you want to even really tackle the other challenge. And now you're wondering why things aren't moving forward. And odds are you've already signed up for a couple of other projects in the last 6 months to help with this one, of course, but it's really just because you got a little bit bored. And what you need to do is kind of identify who you are, figure out what you need to leverage so that you can get to the next step. So keep reading The Big Leap if you're reading it. But what I recommend doing between now and tomorrow, we're going to talk a little bit more about ADHD. We're going to look at the overall scope. I'm going to get into some studies that have been done. We're going to look at some of these characteristics, how you can identify and then leverage them. With that said, obviously, I'm not a licensed therapist. I am not able to diagnose anything. You shouldn't completely self-diagnose. But if we're not looking to go, self-medicate, I think taking some of these personality tests and saying, you know what, I think these are some elements that I've got. And if I can just work on these characteristics and you're 100% honest with yourself, then there's some big things that you're able to accomplish once you've figured out what they are. Stop swimming in the dark, start turning the lights on and figure out what you need to do to be in the light. So do that between today and tomorrow. Look up, just get on Google and look up, adult ADHD tests, free, and you'll find it, right? Hardly it might. What I'd like to do is find a therapist that works with adults and ADHD, or someone that works with high-level entrepreneurs with ADHD. So yeah, I mean, first, second grade is would be great, but I want to get someone that's a little bit more for us, right? That's directly related there. So if someone has a teacher that works with kids, that's fine. If you know someone that's a therapist that kind of specializes, yeah, Myers-Briggs is one that may talk about that. You've got, they have this Enneagram test now. They have, there's all sorts of different personality tests, right? Colby exam, Myers-Briggs, all sorts of other stuff. Those may be great. There's a few real simple adult ADHD tests. Look at those. I like, just for this topic for right now, look at those. And then we'll get into other personality tests at another time, but just hop on Google, look up free adult ADHD test. Odds are there'll be a dozen of them right there. There'll probably be some that for an extra $7 to $20, you can get a much more in-depth analysis. And I think for $20, anytime that they offer something like that, for me, I'll pay $10, $20. And, if I can get more information, that's great. Especially because these things change. If you took the Myers-Briggs and the last time you took it was, when you were 25 or you were starting in the workplace, guess what, guys? It's not you anymore. You're different. And it's worth taking a look at again. So everybody do that. Do a little bit of study. Yes, we're good there. Think about it some. And then I will talk with everybody tomorrow. We'll get a little bit more into some of these studies and what you can do to become more efficient with what you got going on in life. Appreciate you guys. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Andrew. Make it a great day, partner.
Sometimes people have what it takes, but they haven't recognized it yet. Just go forward. So what do you need to do? How do you stand out? So what you need to do is be that person that's different and is bigger than you think. Rise from the ashes and fly.